A former daycare worker will spend 4 months in jail and another year on probation after she pleaded guilty to bringing cocaine to an Oak Creek daycare.
The employee was arrested back in May after a toddler got a hold of the drug.
The baby I brought home that day is not the same baby that I dropped off.
And that is Kimberly Hobson. Her son Prince was the baby exposed to cocaine at that KinderCare.
It's something she says has changed their lives forever. Jenna Ray has the exclusive story.
If I would have never took him to the emergency room that day, I would have never known about the cocaine.
On May 15th, Kimberly Hobson got an unexpected call from her son's daycare,
Saying I need to pick him up because he was throwing up.
When she took him home,
I laid him down and I lift up his shirt. You just see a whole bunch of scratches on his stomach, his side, his butt. There's bruises on his back. Mama Bear kicked in. I went right back up to the daycare and I confronted everybody there.
Kimberly says she got no answers from the KinderCare employees. And after taking Prince to the ER and filing a police report,
CPS, a group of officers came here. They were just like, his toxicology report came back positive for cocaine.
I first met Kimberly 2 weeks after that.
Every day he's coming here, I'm thinking he's safe.
Since that day, my investigation revealed the Oak Creek KinderCare has more than 24 violations cited by the Department of Children and Families, including staff being aggressive with infants, undocumented injuries, kids having access to power tools and toxic chemicals, and cocaine inside the infant room. In October, we learned DCF suspended, then revoked the daycare's license.
That was the first time I smiled in a long time. I was happy. I'm still happy about that.
Yeah, and it's still closed today.
Oh, yes, it is.
You think it should remain closed?
Oh, yeah, permanently.
Since Prince's incident in May, the daycare's had 7 more violations, all of them related to child injuries that went unreported and carelessness of staff.
It makes me feel sad because, like, at the time he was 11 months old. He's just so innocent. Like, if you knew the baby before, like, he was just so happy. His daily routine has been messed up due to, unfortunately, what happened at KinderCare. He has a lot of developmental delays now. Might be special needs now. I wish I didn't send him to KinderCare that day. I wish that day I wouldn't have. That day just changed everything.
In Oak Creek, Jenna Ray, TMJ4 News.
We're told KinderCare is trying to appeal DCF's decision to revoke its license. We reached out to KinderCare and we're waiting to hear back.
Jose Antonio Ibarra has completely and utterly ruined my life.
Friends and family of 22-year-old murder victim Laken Riley are glad her killer is off the streets for good. But questions loom about why Jose Ibarra was allowed to roam them in the first place. The Venezuelan migrant was arrested for illegally entering the country in September 2022, then released and arrested a year later for child endangerment, and released again before an ICE detainer could be issued. At one point, Ibarra stayed here, New York's Roosevelt Hotel, which has been serving as a shelter for migrants. It's where he was given a taxpayer-funded plane ticket to Georgia, where his brother was living, and where he was found guilty of murdering Laken Riley.
So this is purely, it could have been prevented. This young lady's dead, and I want every mayor, every governor of a sanctuary jurisdiction to listen to that tape, listen to this young girl fight for her life, fight for her breath, trying to survive.
Donald Trump's choice for border czar is slamming the decision by some mayors and governors to refuse to work with federal authorities to arrest criminal migrants. Previous cooperation has led to the arrest by ICE of 175 sex offenders in Baltimore.
Instead of us, chasing people around the state, they're now transferring those sex offenders directly to us in jail, which makes the whole process much safer for the community, safer for my officers, and much more efficient.
Growing signs that cooperation could be fading, even in small cities like Frederick, Maryland.
We refuse to aid and abet outside agencies attempting to detain, deport, or remove any residents from our community.
And large cities like Boston and Los Angeles. The LA City Council last week voted unanimously it would now be a sanctuary city.
These are the hardworking folks that pick our crops, that cook our food, they are our nannies. They're essential to our economy. And that's what we're really talking about, protecting those folks.
President-elect Donald Trump insists those policies also protect the criminals, allowing them to be released from jail instead of arrested and deported. by ICE.
You want to allow drugs to come through our southern border? We're going to tariff you. You want to allow them to come through Canada? We're going to tariff you. We are going to cost your countries, your economies. We're going to cost your businesses billions, hundreds of billions of dollars.
That was Eric Trump, the son of President-elect Trump, defending his father's promise to impose major tariffs on goods from the United States' three largest trading partners. The president-elect has justified this position as what he believes is an effort to curb migration and the flow of fentanyl into the United States. He's been making that case publicly. Trump is now threatening to add 25% on tariffs, 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, plus an extra 10% on goods from China. He was already, I believe, based on our reporting, proposing 60% tariffs on Chinese goods. To discuss all of this and the economic and political impact, Mario Parker joins us now. He is a Bloomberg News managing editor and focused on the economy and government. Let's begin, Mario, by looking at what the Canadian leader Justin Trudeau had to say about all of this.
I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do.
So you hear Prime Minister Trudeau. Do you believe Canada, Mexico, China will retaliate on these tariffs, or at least these promises, come next year?
Well, what you heard from Prime Minister Trudeau was a little bit of muscle memory there, right? He's gone through round one with Trump. He sees how this has gone before. In terms of his rhetoric hasn't been as tense as, say, the Sheinbaum's has, right? Where she surprisingly— The
Mexican leader.
Yes, the Mexican president. Where she said that essentially no one wins in a trade war. However, expect some tariffs and pain to be inflicted on both sides. And then, of course, China with its rhetoric saying that, again, similarly, no one wins in a trade war. But we've seen the tit-for-tat trade war between Washington and Beijing that marked Trump's first term here in Washington.
What's notable about what Trump is saying, if anything, on China? I mean, he's already proposed sweeping tariffs. What do you make of the escalation?
Well, I interviewed President Trump over the summer, and it was remarkable just how much he thought that tariffs were the panacea for anything that he has to confront him in terms of geopolitics, right? We saw whether or not there were mixed results from the first trade war, right?
What did he say to you?
He talked about that tariffs are a way to level the playing field, that he's been able to avert wars that we don't know about or conflicts that we don't know about due to the threat of tariffs before, how tariffs are the American people or economists have it wrong, right? This is what he's saying. Economists say that this will lead to inflation here in the U.S. President Trump is saying that actually, on the contrary, tariffs are a wash. And again, that they solve all of the problems. You heard him say that they would be used to fund some of the pay-fors for his tax cuts that he's presented as well. In terms of the relationship with China specifically, what is surprising, again, he's been signaling that he's going to do this for a while. What is surprising is that now he's saying, essentially, if you add on 10% to the 60% he's already proposed, now we're looking at about upwards of 70% in tariffs before he even is inaugurated into office.
What do you make, though, of the president-elect talking a big game on tariffs, but two of the biggest proponents of tariffs in his circle, Peter Navarro and Robert Lighthizer, have yet to be named to the administration?
It is remarkable that Lighthizer, because he was the architect of the first go-round with the tariffs, whether or not, we'll see whether or not the administration is still coming together. He's named some of his key economic advisors so far. We'll see whether or not Lighthizer has a role in the administration. Navarro will probably have a role in the administration in some part as well.
Does Congress have a role in trade policy anymore or not?
And that's what we'll see, right? We'll see whether or not the Republicans have a majority here and whether or not the Senate, the House, will be the rubber stamp that Donald Trump expects it to be. We saw some pushback with some of the nominations, one in particular over the last few days. Whether or not Congress goes along with this, because what you have to remember, as you well know, is the economic pain that will be inflicted. Round one, a lot of that economic pain was inflicted in the heartland. these countries know how to strategically and surgically pinpoint parts of Donald Trump's base. Whether or not those Congress folks who are associated with those districts are willing to take on the pain will be something we'll have to see.
Sounds like a trade skirmish on the horizon, if not a trade war. We'll see. Mario Parker, thank you. We appreciate it.
Our Verify team is looking into claims that President-elect Trump's tariff plan could end up with higher costs for consumers.
Brandon Lewis with our Verify team explains what economists with both sides have to say.
Donald Trump has announced that on day one as president, he will impose tariffs on imported goods from the nation's three largest trading partners, China, Mexico, and Canada. Trump cited the flow of migrants and drugs, including fentanyl, as the primary reasons for the tariffs. Several Verify viewers asked if Trump's plan would actually raise costs for Americans, as some economists have warned. Our sources are the Council on Foreign Relations, the Tax Foundation, the American Action Forum, and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tariffs are taxes that the government imposes on imported goods. Let's say an American store buys shirts for $10 in Vietnam and sells them for $12 in the US. Under Trump's proposed tariff, the business would pay an additional $1 or $2 to import the shirts. While the importer could absorb the cost, economists say it's more likely the business will sell the shirts for up to $14, passing the cost on to the consumer. Estimates from conservative and progressive policy experts vary, but they all say Trump's tariff proposals are generally expected to cost a typical household between $1,700 and $6,000 annually, even if companies shift some manufacturing back to the U.S. So, yes, Trump's proposed tariffs would likely raise costs for Americans. President Joe Biden faced similar criticism earlier this year from fellow Democrats when he imposed increased tariffs on some Chinese goods, including solar panels and electric vehicles. With your Verify,
Mexico's president is pushing back on President-elect Donald Trump's threat to impose steep import taxes.
Trump says he will add a 25% tax on goods and from Mexico and Canada on his very first day in office. Fox 4's Stephen Dial is in our newsroom with more tonight. Stephen.
President-elect Donald Trump says that these tariffs are in response to Mexico and Canada not doing enough with the border and fentanyl. An SMU economist says that if Trump follows through on this promise, the price of things like produce and cars will go up. On the first day in office, President-elect Donald Trump says that he will impose tariffs on the three biggest countries trading with the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and China. With our North American partners, Trump said he will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States. Trump went on to say this tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country.
He may be all over the map on some things, but not on this. He's definitely committed to tariffs.
Trump will also increase the import tax on China by 10%. The tariff threat was a popular talking point on the campaign trail. I asked SMU economist Mike Davis about the potential impact.
Wouldn't that cost just be transferred to the consumer?
Yeah, almost all the cost of the tariff is going to be shifted to the consumer.
The president of Mexico said her country has already done a lot to stem the flow of migrants, but says she is willing to engage in talks. In a statement, Claudia Sheinbaum said, quote, one tariff will be followed by another in response. Davis says that about 20% of cars sold in the U.S. are manufactured in Mexico.
Just think about going to the car dealership and the price of the car you want to buy is 20% more. All of those costs are transferred over to the consumer eventually.
Trump also imposed tariffs during his first term, especially on Chinese imports, but not to this level. The Biden administration kept some of those tariffs in place. It's possible Trump might use the threat of import taxes as leverage for negotiations. But if he does follow through, Davis says consumers could feel the impact quickly.
Any retaliation that's coming from Mexico or Canada will be damaging to U.S. interests.
The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, says that he spoke to Trump today in hopes that both sides can work together. Trudeau said that this, in his words, is something they can do.
I'm Matt Gelka in Washington, where the big promises from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency are now getting some congressional backing. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are the big names attached to the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, but their ambitious project to cut government waste will be in an advisory role. Now, members of Congress are getting posts in official capacities, including Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, who will chair the House's DOGE subcommittee.
There are so many government agencies and government programs and contracts that their cause, their purpose has expired and they're no longer needed. And the American people shouldn't have to pay for them, but yet their budgets get reauthorized year after year.
Iowa Republican Joni Ernst will head up the Senate's DOGE caucus. She's already met with President-elect Donald Trump and Musk. Ernst plans to take aim at remote work, as there will be a push to get all federal employees back in the office.
We can talk about the telework activities that we have seen over the course of the last 3 years, and federal government employees that are simply not working. They don't want the transparency. They don't want us to know that they're only working maybe 10 hours a week.
Musk and Ramaswamy are leaning heavily on friends from business and tech to build up their advisory panel. Their goal to cut $500 billion in annual spending and slash the federal workforce is likely to hit hurdles both on Capitol Hill and in the courts.
So if they go to say there needs to be more open competition, not the monopolization in defense contractors, and propose recommendations, that's something that I think could be supported. If they find areas of truly wasteful spending across the government, they would get support. But if they start to recommend cuts in Social Security or Medicare or Title I education funding, they'll face strong resistance.
A majority of the country's annual $7 trillion budget is split between Medicare, Social Security, and defense spending. Targeting any of those three sectors for significant cuts would likely see strong bipartisan pushback. Reporting in Washington.
Leaders of
Qatar suspended mediation efforts between Hamas and Israel earlier this month and announced the militant group's negotiators had left the Gulf state. Washington has since warned Turkey not to host the Hamas leaders.
We don't believe the leaders of a vicious terrorist organization should be living comfortably anywhere.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a staunch backer of Hamas and describes the group as a liberation movement, even declaring a national day of mourning for assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Analysts say Hamas leaders have been regular visitors to Turkey.
They have been coming and going to Turkey for years. Haniyeh, who was assassinated by the Israelis in Tehran, was in Turkey on the 7th of October 2023.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has said there are no plans for Hamas to open a political bureau in Turkey. But Ankara insists it will continue its policy of engagement and hosting Hamas members.
Ankara will continue his position, number one. Number two, they will continue dialogue with the Hamas in order to establish peace. The urgently we need to peace and stability. And if we cut the time to Hamas, you will talk together whom?
Israel is targeting Hamas leadership for assassination, but so far there have been no attacks reported in Turkey. Israel says Hamas, a US-designated terror group, should not consider Turkey a safe haven.
According to Israeli leaders, no. They will find these Hamas leaders and target them wherever they find them. But I have to say that Turkey has threatened Israel not to operate on its soil. So again, this creates unnecessary tensions in a region that already suffers from so much tensions.
Hamas is still holding more than 100 Israelis hostage. And analysts say that despite Israel's condemnation of Turkey over its links to Hamas, Ankara's connections remain useful for Israel. This was apparent this month when reports said that the head of Israel's Shin Bet intelligence agency met in Turkey with his Turkish counterpart.
Turkey and Israel have one way of dealing with one another in public and another way of dealing with one another diplomatically and in security cooperation. That's always been the case.
Israelis have praised US President-elect Donald Trump's record as a staunch supporter of Israel, prompting some here to warn that links to Hamas threaten to be a big liability for Turkey and a significant point of tension with the new US administration. Dorian Jones, VOA News, Istanbul.